a couple of years ago, a good friend of mine, Ted Lane with First United Bank, introduced me to Amy, and it's been a wonderful relationship ever since. So with that, I'm going to introduce Amy Johannesen, who is an EOS implementer in the North Texas area here. And with that, Amy, why don't you tell us a little bit about you?
Sure. So like you mentioned, Leonard is my dad. He and I ran a company for 17 years, him sitting in the CEO seat and me sitting in the COO seat. So unbeknownst to us, that was the perfect dynamic duo to later become visionary and integrator when we implemented EOS into our business. So we ran that company together for 17 years. Sounds like a success story in that we eventually positioned ourselves for sale, but I can certainly tell you as a business owner, there were a lot of ups and downs during that 17 years. Implementing EOS was part of the journey. So that's how I became an EOS implementer. Once I had done that with my own business and I saw the light, I knew that after we sold that company, this was going to be the next step in my professional career. So that's how I got started with EOS.
Perfect. Well, I'm going to share a quick story that follows along after getting with Leonard, learning what EOS was. C-suite, all of our CFOs are integrators. We're not implementers. We don't compete with Amy. We want to bring Amy into our clients. So we are integrators with all of our clients where we go to the weekly meetings, the level 10s, and we're going to learn a little bit about those level 10s here in a minute. But in that process, quick story with our company, a little while back, we were engaged with a company that was for sale, running out of cash. 3 months, they thought they would be out of cash and have to sell. So they had a letter of intent for $6 million. They engaged us to come in and do the quality of earnings on that company. We did, but when we got in, we saw they had a lot more tools than what they thought they had. And they had a lot more effort that could be done to use EOS in their company. So we installed EOS in that company. We ended up changing out 5 seats. We negotiated contracts for them on a national level, automated their warehouse from changing out those seats. 15 months later, we took that $6 million fire sale into a $29 million cash sale. The CEO of that company swears that by the fact that she said EOS was the tool that was able to be used to coordinate the company, build the culture, build the team together, and allow us all to know what we need to do in that company. So with that tee up, Amy, let's talk about how you go step by step and what is the EOS program generally. And then let's start taking some of the components of that, of how you take a company and start moving it through the plan for finish.
Sure, absolutely. So EOS is just a simple set of comprehensive, practical, and proven tools that we help business owners and their leadership teams implement into their business. And when we do that, our goal is to help them get better at 3 things that we call vision, traction, and healthy. So vision means working with the owner and the leadership team to get everyone 100% aligned on the same page with where they're going and how they plan to get there, making sure that they all see and share and believe in the same vision, right? The next step of that is traction, bringing that vision down to the ground level and executing day in and day out with discipline and accountability. And then finally, we work with the leadership team to help them become more healthy. We want them to be a comprehensive group of people who enjoy spending time together, who are actually functioning and having those healthy, sometimes challenging conversations so that they're eventually getting to where they realize that vision. And what we find is that as goes the leadership team, so goes the rest of the organization. So eventually, business owners get to the point that no matter where they look within their organization, they see people who share their vision, they're executing and gaining traction on a daily basis in the organization, and they're having a good time doing it because they actually enjoy being a part of that healthy team. So that's what I do. I work with the leadership team, the business owner, and the handful of people that are at their right and left hand, their go-to people. Typically, it's their sales leader, their operations leadership, their financial leadership. It's those pieces of the puzzle that all come together to make up that leadership team. And then I work with the leadership team over the course of about 2 years. And there is a step-by-step process and different exercises that we go through to help them implement tools throughout their organization. And when the leadership team gets it and they're firing on all cylinders and they're ready to roll this out, then I coach them through how and when to roll out those tools to the next level of management, and then the next level, and so on and so forth. So eventually, these tools and disciplines migrate throughout their organization, and the entire organization is running on EOS.
I appreciate you took right into one of the steps that we found very instrumental in the company, that we got the management team together.
Mhm.
And all of this works if you've got an integrator that controls the process. So in the particular case of that company, I was the integrator. We
Mhm.
work with companies that already have integrators, and then just part of that management team in the finance chair or as the integrator. So take us through, once that company's got an integrator, we got that top level buying in, they drank the Kool-Aid, for what, if you want to use the expression. And then when we really saw the company start moving is when we had the sales team have their own team. The operations team had their own team. Finance had their own team, to where everybody took that next level of responsibility. So tell me a little bit more how you do that. And then what do you do for developing the data, the scorecards, KPIs? That every level has KPIs, but they're different for every level.
Sure,
Help us how you
absolutely.
do that.
So first of all, one of the first things that we focus on at our first session, so the first session, if you decide to work with an EOS implementer, you are going to book a full day out of the office. It's important to get out of the business to work on the business. So, for me, you would come to my session room, which is in the Dallas area, and we would spend a full day in Focus Day. And at Focus Day, we're going to learn the 5 foundational tools. The first of which is the accountability chart. You've got to make sure you've got the right people in the right seats. Of course, we've all heard that term before. Jim Collins popularized it in his book, Good to Great, but he doesn't tell you exactly tactically how to do that. So we have what's called the accountability chart, and we walk you through the accountability chart exercise. And that's where it's really important to identify the major functions of the organization. What do we do here, and what has to get done for us to be successful 6 to 12 months moving forward? And then we clarify the key roles and accountabilities for each of those major functions. And then we go back and put names in seats. So what I tell my teams when we first start working together is, okay, you're all fired, wipe the slate clean, we're starting over. It doesn't have to be the way that it's always been. We have the power to change that right here and now, and we do that. So the accountability chart is really foundational to making sure we clarify if this organization is going to move forward with success, what are the key functions that have to get done? What are the key roles within each of those functions? And let's match the people that we've got with those keys, roles, and accountabilities. And if we have some holes, we need to call that out. We need to identify that. So getting those right people in the right seats is really, really imperative. And then at the level above that, it's the visionary and integrator role. And Paul identified that the integrator is often the key in driving success. When I work with a team, the integrator has to be the EOS champion. They've got to love it because they're the one who is really going to harmoniously integrate all the moving parts and pieces within this organization. So when the integrator gets it, then they can help make sure that everyone else in the organization is moving forward appropriately. But it's important to clarify that every organization needs the integrator. They're the glue. They're beating the drum. They're keeping the pace in the organization. They're holding it all together. They keep those trains on track. They keep the trains on time. That's their job. Not every organization has a visionary necessarily, but what we find in EOS is that most entrepreneurial organizations do. They have that visionary who's, those big ideas, those big relationships. They come to every meeting with 20 ideas, 19 of them might be crazy, but that one, that's the creative problem solving that's going to change everything. And so we've got to get clarity first on that visionary integrator duo, because it's really important that a visionary doesn't get stuck in that integrator role. If they do, you're going to find a lot of stops and starts because everything's a bright, shiny idea and it sounds great, but they don't necessarily have the follow through to see that to the next level. In my organization particularly, and Paul mentioned my dad, so he was the visionary and I was the integrator, and most really great entrepreneurial organizations need both. They have 2 people at the helm of a great organization. The visionary and the integrator are like puzzle pieces. They're that dynamic duo and they have to fit together just right because that's the relationship that's going to drive the company forward. So once we have clarity in each of those seats on the accountability chart, then we move into having regular weekly team meetings. And Paul mentioned that his team comes in and can help facilitate having that regular weekly leadership team meeting if an organization's not doing so already. We have in the EOS world what's called the level 10 meeting agenda, and we call it a level 10 because we want your meeting to be a 10. On a scale of 1 to 10, it should be a 10. We don't ever want a meeting to be unproductive. You're not looking forward to it. We're dreading another meeting, which is often the case, especially when we're spinning circles and we're not actually getting anywhere. So we walk you through how to run the most productive level 10 meeting. And like Paul mentioned, a piece of that is measurables. We have a scorecard, a weekly scorecard. We want to measure forward-looking activity-based measurables on a weekly basis so we know exactly what's going on in our organization. You know, there's a reason that the windshield of your car is so large, but the rear view mirror is pretty small. I don't want to talk about what happened last quarter and what happened last month for 20 minutes or 30 minutes because we're wasting a lot of time on things that we can't change. If we're looking at everything weekly and we're predicting based on inputs what our output is going to be, then we have a much bigger picture in front of us. And we know if we're driving this car, when it's time to speed up or when it's time to pump the brakes. And we have a weekly accountability, that weekly level 10 meeting built in so that we can make those changes and pull those levers in real time rather than looking at last month or last quarter. It's important to do both. You have to look at where you've been to determine where you are and where you need to go. But we want the most of our conversations to be about that activity-based, forward-looking measurables that help us predict the future outcomes, because that's what we're really trying to drive forward.
Perfect. What I'd like for you to do is every level 10 meeting starts with one particular area. Talk
Yes.
about that area and what is the reason and benefit of starting with the segue? Why does anybody want to spend that amount of time? Go.
Okay. We start every level 10 meeting and every EOS session with a segue. It's a check-in. We want to start on a positive note and we want to celebrate success. So we ask our teams, what's your personal and professional best since the last time we got together? If you're meeting weekly, that was 7 days ago. So it's a quick check-in. It just changes your thinking. There is science and psychology in starting with a check-in. You elevate your thinking so you're not stuck in the weeds, worrying about that meeting you've got after this or that phone call you just got off of. It elevates your thinking to reflect on the previous 7 days and celebrate the wins. What was the best thing that happened personally and what was the best thing that happened professionally? And we do both, including the personal, because oftentimes, particularly for entrepreneurs, your personal and professional world are so intertwined. I mean, if this is your baby, if this is your company that you started, it's everything. You think about it all the time. And, people talk about that work-life balance. In my mind and in EOS, it's all the same. It's just my life balance, because my personal world and my professional world are the same. And I want to harmoniously, celebrate what's happening in both of those. So to Paul's point, every one of these meetings starts that way. And there is that science and psychology in elevating out of the weeds, reflecting on the positive and starting off with that positive note. It's also our opportunity as business owners to check in with our people. So Paul mentioned that in the teams that he sees or the companies that he sees are successful, once you have that level 10 meeting pulse for your leadership team, each of those leaders is then having a level 10 meeting with their team. So the sales team is meeting weekly, operations team is meeting weekly, the finance team is meeting weekly. So you're starting your meeting, you're running it on the same agenda. You're also starting with that check-in, that segue with them. It's your opportunity to check in on your people and take the pulse so that you can be aware of anything that might be changing over the course of time.
And I would follow on with that. We use it to do exactly everything that Amy just mentioned. We also, it's one of our forms of communication. If some of the things that happened in our last week include things we would like to share or need help with, we have an opportunity to bring that into the meeting and ask for help on a personal level or on a business level.
Mhm.
And what that ultimately does is start building camaraderie between the people that are on the meeting. They're talking about the good, they're talking about the help, and every time someone needs help, there is somebody in the meeting that says, I can help you with that, or In our case, we're a faith-based company. We thought, let's pray about that. Let's get involved and let's help. All of that ultimately culminates in a cohesive team for the ones that want to be part of that team. And it also lets you know, as an integrator of that team, the ones that are not actively being involved. And that helps you go to the next situation that I want to talk about, is as you go through these pieces, looking at the data, talking about the things, now let's talk about how that develops into the right people.
Okay. So when I mentioned clarifying your accountability chart, you need to know what functions you have, what roles need to be filled, and what those key accountabilities within each of those seats is. So when we are establishing a weekly scorecard, if these are the 5 key accountabilities in the customer service team box, essentially, then I want to have weekly scorecard measurables that are tied to those 5 roles and responsibilities. If customer service is important, we've got to manage that proactively. And every week in a weekly meeting, we're checking in on the measurables that tie to those accountabilities. So it makes it really clear when something starts to go off track. And if something is off track, we set a goal, we assign an owner for that measurable. If it's off track, we need to make it an issue. We need to talk about it, dive in, dissect it, pull back the layers, find out what we're missing, what could we be doing differently, where does the problem lie? And sometimes that means, whose responsibility is it? I tell my teams all the time, when we very first start, I expect you to be open and honest in this meeting. Open means open to hearing one another, open to considering new ideas. And honest means if it's in your head, just say it, just get it on the table. We can't solve an issue if we don't know where or what or potentially who it is. And so to Paul's point, how does that help us determine right people, right seats? So right people are people who fit our core values. They fit our culture like a glove. They believe in our values. They exemplify those on a regular basis. Right seat means that they are consistently excellent at their jobs. And how do we know if they're excellent at their jobs? Well, we've defined those roles that are in their seat on the accountability chart. We're measuring those weekly. If they're off track, we're working to resolve those. But we may find a situation where they don't GWC that seat. GWC stands for get it, want it, and has the capacity to do it. Get it is just your God-given talent, innate understanding of what it takes to get the job done. You just get it, right? It makes sense. It clicks. Want it is a genuine desire and want to do that work. There is no amount of compensation or reward or title that makes someone truly want to do something. You have to get out of bed in the morning and you want to go do that job, right? Capacity means that you have the necessary acquired skills and training to be successful in that work. And so we may find over the course of time, we've got a great person who aligns with our values. And Paul mentioned, his company is a faith-based organization. Most of the teams that I deal with in Dallas are also faith-based. So they take their core values very, very importantly. And so we may find that we've got the right fit, but they're not consistently excellent at the job that we've hired them to do. And the good news is, in a growing organization, when you've got plenty of seats on the accountability chart and you may be adding roles here and there, you may be able to find a seat where they're better suited and their talents and skills and abilities better match that, and they can be successful. The bad news is, unfortunately, the opposite can be true, and sometimes you're going to have to make a change because, unfortunately, in a for-profit organization, we can't afford to keep people around just because we like them. So when that happens, I will encourage you to make a change.
And with that situation, back to the initial example that I'm kind of weaving through here, we ultimately at those meetings made the decision, and then C-suite helped them find 5 people, 2 people in the management level, 3 people in mid-management level, to replace those seats to get better people, or the right people in this case, in those seats for that company to gel and continue to grow. So that is extremely important. Let's take the next situation of kind of the nuts and bolts of future. Rocks, traction, meeting pulse. Let's transition into what are rocks and why do we call them rocks and what do we want to do with them?
Okay. So rocks are 90-day business priorities. I think many of us have seen Stephen Covey's example of the glass cylinder, and the glass cylinder represents, how much time you have. And, there's only so much capacity. There's only so much space in that cylinder, and there's only so much time in any given day, week, month, year. And so when you've got rocks and pebbles and sand and water on the table, the challenge is, how are you going to fit all of this in? And so there's a number of different ways you can try, but the truth is, only if you put the rocks in first, and then the pebbles, and then the sand, and then pour the pitcher of water over, that's the only way that it's all going to fit. And so that's kind of where this principle comes from. And Vern Harnish made it even more popular in his book, The Rockefeller Habits. So rocks are the big things, the things you have to do first, because if you don't get those into the glass jar first, you're not going to have room for every other thing. Okay. Pebbles are your daily responsibilities, just the things you have to do as part of doing your job. The sand is the interruptions, because interruptions are going to come. If you work with people, you're going to be interrupted at some point. And then water is still everything else. We have other things we have to do in our lives, not just our job in our 40, 60, 80 hours a week, whatever that is. So rocks are those 90-day priorities, the big things, the things that we have to do first in order to advance our agenda. And so in EOS, we live in a 90-day world. There is just, in human nature, is for the rope to start to fray every 90 days, something that sounds like a good idea and we're so gung-ho and committed to. If we don't have regular built-in checkpoints, it's kind of like, we just kind of start to lose attention, especially our visionaries. So it's important that we live in this 90-day world. We come up for air every 90 days. We want to look at where we've been, assess, what worked and what didn't, celebrate those successes, glean any lessons that we learned, check our vision, realign, make sure we as a leadership team are still all on the same page and rowing in the same direction, determine what our 90-day priorities are for the business moving forward into the next quarter, and then we dive back into work and go back to work for 90 days. So it's important to come up for air every 90 days. Think of it, if you're in the Amazon and you've got to, carve a path or, make a road to get from here to the water source. If I just give everybody a bunch of machetes and tell them to go out swinging, sure, we might get a path. It might not be the most efficient process. It's important for leadership to climb the tallest tree and check to make sure we're still in the right place. We're still going in the same direction. We haven't gotten off track. We want to use our energy in the most direct way to get us directly to the water source. And so that's why we set rocks. We come up for air every 90 days and we set our 90-day business priorities. And there's another reason that we do it 90 days. If we were to decide, this is our 1-year plan, this is our 3-year strategic planning, whatever, it's 200 pages and it sits in a book, and, we paid a consultant, tons of money to come in and help us put that together. Great. But if we don't check it every 90 days and realign and reassess and set new priorities, no one's ever going to pick that up and read it. We're not going to remember what we said. The other piece of that is the world changes. And in the entrepreneur world, it's changing regularly. So it's important that we come up and reassess those priorities and determine what's the most important thing in our next 90 days. If I had set a plan, in January of 2020, it would have been out the window, come March when COVID was actually all over the world and we were having to shut down and change the way that we did business. So it's important that we don't get too far ahead of ourselves and we only are setting, 90 days at a time from a strategic planning perspective. Now we do forward looking, we do a 10-year target, we do a 3-year picture, and we do a 1-year plan that sets SMART goals, but then we break that down into 90-day chunks so that we're actively reassessing what's going on in our business and prioritizing what has to get done in the next 90 days.
All right. Well, let's segue into, we found the rocks. We've determined the rocks. We've got to get there. Okay, let's figure out how we work around the rocks. In our everyday, every week situation, it starts with, what's the pebble that's in front of us that we're tripping over? What are the issues in the issues list, the IDS, things that we're not going to be able to just go past, we're going to have to fix? Talk
Right.
about how that now fits into developing and making sure the rocks are met.
Okay. So with each of my teams, we set a 1-year plan. Okay. And this is a plan. It's on paper. This is the plan. We start with a revenue, profit, and measurable targets. So we know exactly what success looks like. We've defined that clearly. And then we say, what are the most important things, the 3 to 7 most important things we must get done in this 1-year plan? Okay. We commit to that. We write it in smart language. It's very, very clear. These are the things that must get done to support that revenue, profit, and measurable target. Okay. And then we break that into quarterly rocks. So first quarter into that, 4 quarters, and first quarter into that 1-year plan, where do we start? What must come first that's going to get us toward our goals? We set those 90-day rocks. To Paul's point, there are going to be things in our way. There are going to be issues that we're tripping over. So I've just met with a team yesterday. It's January. Their next session is in April. And I say, okay, your session is April 22nd. What does success look like on April 22nd? Well, they might not know yet how they're going to get there. And there's probably a couple things in the way, but we begin with the end in mind. What does success look like when we see you again on April 22nd? We clearly define that. After we have set our rocks, we go into issue processing. So all during this process, whether it's your weekly level 10s, your quarterly sessions with your implementer, you're bubbling up issues. You're identifying the things that are standing in our way between here and that success as we've defined it on April 22nd. So we've populated the board with an issues list. And then we use our issue solving track, what we call IDS. IDS is identify, discuss, and solve. So we go through the IDS process to set up our issues, knock them down, and make them go away forever. What we find often is the beginning of a journey. Most of those issues are actually symptoms of a true root cause. They're usually just a lot of symptoms. And when we identify them and pull back the layers and ask all those probing questions, we really get to the root. And when we solve those issues at the root, they don't keep coming up over and over, and we're not having to talk about them again and again and again. So IDS is the issue solving track that we use in EOS, because we found that even really great leadership teams are often good at getting in a room and discussing the heck out of something, but they never really reach a true solve. They never get to the root of it, and they never agree on what action to take to solve the problem and make it go away. So IDS is our answer to that. And you do that in 2 ways. So in your weekly level 10 meeting agenda, there is a section for IDS. If you have a 90-minute meeting, 60 minutes of that is spent solving your key issues. And that's the weekly stuff that's coming up. It's just kind of getting in your way, the whack-a-mole that you're playing as you're running your company, okay? When we can solve those issues at the root, like I mentioned, eventually you'll find you have less and less issues popping up each week. Those are our short-term issues. Anything that happens on a weekly basis and it's coming up in our day-to-day operations, that's our short-term issues. Now, we also have what we identify as long-term issues. And there is a long-term issues list on your VTO. The VTO is our 2-page strategic planning document, the Vision Traction Organizer. So we have a long-term issues list there, which is kind of a parking lot for things that we know we need to get to, but it's not right now. It's not this quarter, or there's an opportunity ahead. We want to put a pin in that, leave it up there so we don't lose track of it, but we're not ready for that yet. We're not ready for that conversation. Those long-term issues are issues that you generally solve at your quarterly strategic planning session with your implementer. Your implementer will facilitate the IDS to help you get through those key issues and resolve those key issues so that you could go back into your business and hit the ground running on your rocks.
Well, you've touched on it in many aspects of your conversation. Obviously, this is a coordinated effort and process in its entirety. But let's go into the process documented, followed by all. How does this work? And then we're going to start taking that into the final area of vision, where you started, where you are, where you're going to go. Let's go into processes.
Processes. So one of the 6 key components, and in EOS, we're always working to strengthen the 6 key components of your business, because we find, business owners, entrepreneurs wrestle with 136 issues simultaneously. But the truth of the matter is that most of those issues, like I mentioned, are symptoms. And to the degree that we can strengthen the 6 key components of your business, then those symptoms just kind of fall into place. So we talked about vision, we talked about people, we've talked about data, issues, identifying those issues, knocking them down, making them go away forever. The 5th key component is the process component. we can't run a great business if we don't have a playbook, if we don't know the rules, right? And every business has a handful of key processes, the way they do what they do, that sets them apart from everyone. So there's value in us identifying what our core processes are, identifying what they are, documenting them at a high level. And in EOS, we use the 20-80 approach. 20% of the steps to get us 80% of the way there, okay? 80% of the desired result. The point of diminishing returns, there's no real value. There's no ROI on going 100%. What that ends up getting you is a 600-page SOP manual that sits on a shelf that no one actually reads, okay? So we outline our core processes. We document them at a high level in a linear approach. So we know exactly what steps 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and then all the bullets, beneath that may be. The value in that is that it makes your organization more predictable. It makes it more scalable. It makes it more profitable because everyone knows the right and best way to do things. They know where to find the information. And the piece that really drives it home is that followed by all checklist. You have to train your people. Just because you document it doesn't mean they know where the documentation is. You have to go in and train anyone and everyone who touches that process so they know the right and best way to do it every time. And then they can train the next person and so on and so forth. And we're all operating from the same playbook. So that's really the value in identifying your core processes, documenting them, simplifying them at that high level, and then training and make sure that everyone knows where to find that information. And then the next piece of that, even once you've trained, is you have to measure. You have to inspect what you expect. So just because I've passed it out or I've said, hey, it lives in that shared drive, go train, doesn't mean that I've communicated how important it is. So when you are actually measuring the results that you desire, first of all, you can find out where the holes and flaws are so you can revise your processes if necessary. You're communicating to your employees that this is important because I'm measuring it. That's how important it is. We want to improve this. We want to get better. And then you're empowering them in their weekly team meetings to identify how to update and change those processes. And you're eliciting that feedback and having that two-way communication, which is really important in how you lead and manage your people. So simplifying and documenting, training, making sure everyone's following the same processes, and then measuring the results that you expect so that we can find out where we need to make changes to the process or to the people.
All right, well, let's go into a wrap of all of these components we've talked about and bring it to the highest level of vision, where we start, where we run, where we go to.
Right. So vision is knowing exactly where we're going and how we plan to get there. And like I said, we live in that 90-day world where it's important to come up for air every 90 days, look at where we've been, celebrate the success, figure out what lessons we learned, how can we become better predictors of this organization in the next 90 days, clarifying that we're all on the same page, and then going into work for the next 90 days. And it's important also that we're communicating that vision regularly to the entirety of the organization. We're sharing those core values. We're telling them where we're going long term. We're continuously painting that vision picture and reminding them of what it looks like and how they can be a part of it and help it be successful. So in summarizing the 6 key components, vision is at the top and traction is at the bottom. That's no coincidence. If you can't bring your vision down to the ground level and execute, vision without traction is hallucination. So you have to be able to execute consistently day in and day out with that true discipline and accountability. And we do that with the level 10 meeting pulse, with making sure we have the right people in the right seats from an accountability chart perspective, with tracking that data with the scorecard measurables, keeping that meeting pulse, setting those rocks, keeping that pulse on a weekly basis in your company, on a quarterly basis with your implementer, and making sure that everyone is aligned toward the same common goals in that shared vision.
Well, I hope everyone on this call understands why we love working with Amy. So at this point, I'm going to open this up for questions of how can you apply any of the things we've talked about today to your company, or for more clarity of what EOS and Amy can do for your company on a go-forward basis. So Lorenzo, get ready. I'm going to be coming to you. You got to turn on your computer there in a minute. But I'd like to find out from you, Lorenzo, how would you look at this process and apply it either to yourself or to your clients?
look, can you hear me okay?
We can.
Okay, perfect. I've been taking copious notes, by the way. Excellent job. Look, I've been in organizations where that, number one, the vision is not clear.
Mm-hmm.
And even though we're in the same building, I can say one thing, the EVP is saying something else, and the CEO is saying something else, and there's no consistency, right? So I think this, and just hearing everything and having, you know, these measuring tools, right? Because we had good intentions, horrific results. We would go in, right, and we say we were measuring it, but it was really someone just venting frustration. And it's like, okay, now we're back on to where you were talking about identifying the pebbles. Like, we're stuck on the pebbles and there's no solution, right? So the idea is we want to move forward with a solution, identify the problem, like you said, identify, discuss, and then provide a solution. We got stuck with the problem. And we would leave the meeting and say, okay, so what are we doing? So this is excellent information. And I think it's good if you have, just like anything, I think businesses are, you know, where I've seen successful businesses, there's always systems and processes in place. And this is a great system to go in and run a business, because without it, it's organized chaos.
Yes.
Can you see the benefit for having a third party come in and keep everybody on level grounds, level conversations, and level transparency?
I do. And the reason being, I look, I think as much a third party brings an accountability to everybody that's sitting in that meeting, right? As opposed to the CEO who's saying, you know, I am the beginning and the end, and that's it. If you bring a third party, there's that accountability that we're all holding ourselves accountable. So yeah, I think it for sure.
All right, Jay, you've got a financial group there. How can you see using this in your company or with your clients as that third party accountability can help you? And you're still muted, so be aware there.
Well, I would probably be the last person to ask, because since I am in the life insurance brokerage business, so we're usually, most of us are one guy teams, you know, outside of some groups in my office. And the other side is I run a networking group, which has nothing to do with this. But I was just interested in learning what you guys you know, people more organized with small companies, because that's what my stepfather was all about. He ran a shopping center with about three partners, and he was the senior partner. But they had just a very old-fashioned structure. Whoever yelled the loudest probably got their way. So it's, I'm listening to this, Amy. I just love the way you speak and the way you explain it in English. So I really understand what you're saying. But unfortunately, to my circle, it just doesn't apply to that many people, because most of them were either entrepreneurs, or living in Connecticut. It was all about, hey, you used to work at GE, you used to work at such and such. So it's just fascinating the way you take it down to that mid-sized business, which most marketing people salivate to meet, but we never know how, because you guys are too busy to pick up the phone.
Well, can you see this ever being used in some of your clients? People that you're selling product to that you
Possibly.
see that are struggling or they need help, or and you know, when you're in that client, you're an advisor. Now, as a trusted advisor, you say, hey, I see something. Let me introduce you to, spend 5 minutes or spend 90 minutes, whatever the circumvent is here, to do something to help yourself so I can sell you more product. There's your real motivation. You want them healthy.
Yes.
Amy, what are your thoughts to that?
Look, that's possible. I mean, you know, I run into a lot of people. We run events every month, and we always get new people in there. So that's definitely a distinct possibility, Paul.
Amy, how do you see people being trusted advisors at whatever level they touch a company?
Well, you know, it's just like the clients that you deal with, Paul, and really bankers and fractional services, anyone who has a direct relationship with these, you know, businesses that are generally entrepreneurial, 10 to 250 employees, and they're, ideally for me, clients are more afraid of the status quo than they are of change. I like working with people who are passionate about rolling up their sleeves, doing the work, and changing it, like rewriting the script. And so for anyone who is in a professional service or a fractional service or has relationships with companies like that, they're all candidates for EOS. They don't have to be hurting. They don't have to be failing. When we ran our business, we grew from 0 to 55 employees, 35 million in top line revenue. That sounds like a success story over the course of 12 years. But the truth of the matter was that we were millions of dollars in debt, and we were constantly running behind with all of our primary vendors. And it's unfortunate that so many entrepreneurs live that struggle, and it bleeds over into their personal life. It bleeds over into everything that they do. And you see the pretty picture on the outside, and they're celebrating the successes, but they're not telling you how much it hurts or how much they've had to give up along the way. And so that's why I became an EOS implementer. We brought in an implementer that we worked with from 2012 to 16 by the name of Mark Winters. Now, Mark Winters went on to write the book Rocket Fuel. He's been in the EOS community for a number of years, very widely respected. And to Paul's point, when he wrote Rocket Fuel, which is about that visionary integrator duo, my dad and I got to be interviewed. We're mentioned very, very briefly on page 32. That's like my 2-second claim to fame right there. Page 32, my name is in print in a book. And I got to be a part of the launch panel. And that's when I really got to experience how amazing this community was. So we transformed our organization from the inside out. We put the right people in the right seats. We defined and developed systems and structures and processes that we didn't have. And we climbed out of that hole that we had dug ourselves into. It wasn't easy, but these tools were simple. And they're simple for a reason, because less is more. And we want to be able to clearly communicate that to everyone in the organization to be sure we're all acting together. So for us, when we were able to do that and position ourselves for sale, I knew that this was the next step in my entrepreneurial journey. This was the next step for me professionally. I want to help other entrepreneurs do what we were able to do, because I lived the struggle and I know how difficult it was. We sat around the kitchen table one time, the 4 of us, my husband and I and my mom and dad, and discussed bankruptcy law and contacted a bankruptcy attorney and talked about, who could keep what car. And it was a very, very challenging conversation. And so often entrepreneurs of that size business are living that struggle and they're not talking about it. They're saying, hey, I went to such and such thing and I went on this vacation, and you see the highlight reel, right? But I know the truth. I know what's really going on behind the scenes. So anyone who works in professional services, you may not even realize that these entrepreneurs need help like that, but they do. And so just make the introduction. Say, have you ever heard of EOS? Traction's a great book to read. If you don't want to read Traction, hey, I've got this friend Amy, and she can help you find someone in your area that can give you the movie version of the book in 90 minutes, and then you decide if it's right for you. I don't sell EOS. EOS is what it is. And if they want it, if they need it, great. I will help you. Either I'll, work with you as your implementer, or I'll find the right implementer for you. We have 35 implementers in Dallas, Fort Worth, and we have over 750 worldwide. So I can help you find the right fit for you in your entrepreneurial journey to get more of what you want out of your business.
Well, Amy, if you would send an email to me, it's just my name @gmail.com. And I'm the only one in the universe. I've never seen my name anywhere.
Okay.
And I do happen to know some fractional CFOs who are very sophisticated guys. So I could make one introduction within a week or so that I would gladly send your way. Gladly.
Sure. I'd be happy to.
Thank you.
And the bottom line of that, you're going to help some CFO help one of their clients. So that's the thought pattern here.
Fantastic. That's
all right, Chris. I can't believe that you've been quiet so long. Chris, what do you got there?
Yeah, no, obviously. So I have a number of questions. I'll just start off with one. Amy, obviously, we've worked together. So I've had the pleasure of working with Amy through an EOS process. One of the questions I often run into working with entrepreneurs is something along the lines of, well, we know about EOS. We sort of do an L10. We kind of know a little bit about our values and our people. To me, I'll just use the word magic, and I'll share a quick story there. I remember working with one company, and they start off, I think they finish the day saying, I didn't think we had the time to do this today. Now I realize at the end of the day, we couldn't afford not to have done it. So that, kind of speaks volumes. I think there's, I'll say a magic. There's almost a magic in the simplicity and the way these come together. So I've seen very sophisticated people, Jay, to your point, who don't have this system and who aren't doing as well as they could otherwise be. If Amy, maybe could you say a few words maybe about how all the pieces sort of fit together? Is there a benefit to doing all the pieces? I think you're going to say yes, but I'd love to kind of hear that in your view on that.
Sure. So EOS Worldwide, if you want to check this out further, it's eosworldwide.com. EOS gives away all the tools for free. Okay. You might not know what to do with it. Maybe you want to read traction. Maybe you want to go down that rabbit hole. But the thing about it is these tools are free. And so I will say there is value in using these tools. And when I do a 90-minute meeting, I give away tools. And I say, even if you don't use me, even if you decide not to move forward with EOS, use this tool because it's really, really valuable. And particularly, I'm talking about the Vision Traction Organizer because I think it's really important. So there are free tools. You can absolutely use free tools. That's one option. You can read the book Traction and try to implement, or walk your team through some of these exercises in addition to using the tools. That's another option. As EOS Worldwide, you can sign up to become your own self-implementer and choose to self-implement. So you could, pay a monthly fee to subscribe to the community, to gain access to the materials, the training videos, and all of the things so that you could self-implement if you so chose. That's an option. Obviously, the most valuable is working with an EOS implementer. And you're not paying for the hours, you're paying for the years of experience. Their years of experience and the fact that they get to play the role of teacher, facilitator, and coach to guide you through your journey. Teacher, I'm going to teach you EOS. It's a simple set of tools. I'm going to teach you how to use them. Facilitator, I'm going to facilitate finding the right answer in the room. I'm not an expert in your industry, but the cool thing about EOS is it's industry agnostic. Whether you're selling flooring or, vitamins or clothing or professional services, you have all of the same issues. It's just widgets that we're talking about, right? And more money, more problems. So the more zeros you have, probably the higher the magnitude of your issues, okay? So regardless of what it is, these tools are going to use, and I'm going to facilitate you using these tools to find the answers to your questions. And then as a coach, I get the value in standing on the sidelines and seeing the game that you're playing from a different angle, from a different perspective. And I have the value of working with several other companies and, watching them play the game of entrepreneurship as well. So as a teacher, facilitator, and coach, the implementer can really walk you through the process and ask the hard questions. We talked about earlier whether you saw the value of having an outside third party. Well, to Lorenzo's point, if the CEO is the beginning and the end, has anyone in that room ever challenged the CEO? Because I sure will. And I did it yesterday. I'll give you an example. Everyone on the team, the leadership team, was asked to complete a people analyzer of their direct reports. The people analyzer is the simple tool that we use to identify, do they align with our core values, and do they GWC the roles in their seat? Everyone was asked to complete the people analyzer. They had submitted it on a shared drive. Well, the CEO went in and highlighted in yellow all the things she didn't agree with. So how would you feel as a leadership team member? You're leading a team to find out that your CEO went behind you and is watching over your shoulder and checking your work and identifying what she doesn't agree with, what she thinks you got wrong, and not even having a face-to-face conversation about it, but doing it online and then sending it back to you. It was just icky. And so I called it out and I was like, how did that make you feel? How did that make you feel? And we talked about it around the table. And, that's the thing about having that third party who's going to call it like they see it and facilitate you through the difficulty to get to the right answer, to get to the other side when we all are having those open and honest and transparent conversations and we're coming out healthier because of it. And I tell my teens all the time, you have to go through it to get to it. And it's going to hurt. And it's going to be messy sometimes. And very, very rarely do I have a team on day one who looks the same at their 1-year annual or at their second annual 2 years from now. Very, very rarely. In fact, I haven't had it once in 2.5 years that I've been implementing. And it certainly wasn't that way with my team. The team that we started with went through a major change at about 2 years in. We went through another major change at about 4 years in. And that's normal and it's natural. And it's because you're doing it right. You're using the tools, you're getting the traction that you want, you're finding the right people in the right seats. And so I certainly think that there's value in having that outside third party, that facilitator, that implementer who's going to help you get there faster. Because would you challenge those things on your own? You know, is anyone going to raise the hand and tell, you know, Mr. or Mrs. CEO, I didn't like that you did that? Unless there's somebody in the room that says, this is a safe place, we're going to be open and honest. And I'm reading the room. And if they're not willing to call it out, I'm going to call it out because I know they were feeling it, but I'm the one that's not afraid to say it. I tell my teams often, I'm going to say something today that could get me fired. And I'm okay with that because you need to hear it. I haven't been fired yet.
Haven't been fired yet.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Yeah, not yet.
Tricia,
And
you
just a
have-
quick follow-up.
Hold on, Chris. Hold
yeah.
on, Chris. Trisha's had her hand up here.
Oh, sorry.
Let me turn this to Trisha for just a minute and go from there.
I think so many things you said, it's fantastic, Amy, and thank you for sharing with us. And of course, always, Paul and the team, thank you for organizing such great content. I'm curious, and as I said, you've alluded to it in several ways. You mentioned about, you know, it's not the same team 1 year in, 2 years in, 4 years in. But I'm curious how you address, and you mentioned status quo, and you like people that are wanting change and, you know, moving toward change. I really get that. I think of the sort of formula of my teams over time, and it's always been at least 3/4, 80% that are very forward thinking, absolutely moving. You know, you have to kind of like stop to say, oh, wait a second, I haven't gotten fueled up yet. You know, they're going. And then there's the percentage of the team that is, and it has to be much smaller for it to be successful on my teams, is the ones that will think of everything that won't go right if we just run. And as long as that's in balance and very much appreciated for what it is, and that's a whole culture development and work that really needs to go into that. Otherwise that can not go well. But assuming you have all that in place, it's incredible. The question that I'm getting to is how you address those status quo or the people who aren't bought in where you really, really need them bought in, right? And so, you know, across all of C-suite, obviously we see it all. I've seen it all. And, you know, you have very large organizations where you're not going to get buy-in from other groupings, other divisions, other, you know, parts of the company, whatever it is. In smaller organizations, you can have investors or owners or chairs, you know, whatever, that aren't bought in. And I'm curious how you handle that and how you consult your clients as they're working through that with their teams.
Sure. So, with an entrepreneurial team, at the 90-minute meeting, I'm going to paint the picture of what this looks like. And I tell you what it looks like to work with me as an implementer. And this is what the journey is. And typically at the end of that, it's either sign us up or nope, this isn't for us. And I ask them to make that decision together in the room. So we're talking to the whole leadership team and we're either on board or we're not. If the CEO, if the owner is not on board, this is never going to work. And I'll call it out right then and there. You know, if we can't get a commitment and buy-in from the top, no one is ever going to commit to this. Okay. I have also been in a situation where I had a leadership team. I've got one that I've been working with for 2 years now. Recently added a new hire to the leadership team. And he still has not decided about me or about EOS. And we're 2 quarters in now. And much of the body language is like this and just kind of sitting back and judging, and I'm not really playing along, and, you know, snide comments here and there. For me and for most implementers, I would tell you, because this is what we are hired to do, I'm going to enter the danger. I'm going to call that out, and we're going to have a conversation about it, open and honest, in the room, because we all have to be on board here. And if we're not all on board, You're going to be frustrated when you don't get the results you desire, and you're going to blame me and you're going to blame EOS. And then you're going to go talk bad about both of us. And that doesn't do any good in the community. Okay. We are very proud of our community and the value that we bring to our organizations. And I want to be sure that you're not blaming your lack of results on me or on EOS when it was your bad attitude. And so I'm going to call that out. There have also been opportunities. I work with a large nonprofit, and they have a board. And so they run as a professional organization. They have, CEO, COO, CFO. I mean, they run like an organization, but they are accountable to the board. And the CEO got approval from the board and obtained budget. But we started this EOS journey without the board, because the board doesn't work in the organization on a daily basis. They don't run it. They don't make decisions. They're not operating, the play-by-play. But at some point, there needs to be alignment, because otherwise you're going to have friction between the leadership team and the board. And the CEO is charged with doing that very delicate dance between the two. And so I was invited to come in and speak to the board. And I did. I presented to the board. This is exactly what we were doing. They loved it. The cool thing about boards is most of them have run a professional organization. Some of them have been entrepreneurs. They've been in a C-suite position and they love this stuff. They eat it up. They know what works because they've seen it in other organizations, maybe not called EOS, maybe similar concepts and principles. I mean, none of this stuff is new. It's just the simplicity and the way that we roll this out through an organization. So it's important to have buy-in, and truth be told, if there is not buy-in at all levels, particularly top-down, leadership, boards, ownership, this will not work. And so it's important to call that out in the beginning and challenge it.